Welcome back to Easy Health and Fitness, also known as Torah Health and Fitness. Thank you to Torah Anytime for hosting the video, and welcome to viewers around the world on YouTube or wherever you're getting your podcasts. In the last episode, we spoke about Malava Malka, and one of my listeners commented to me in a message, I don't really do Malava Malka. He was a new listener and it didn't speak to him. So I suggested he listen to the previous episode about Shabbos, and that spoke to him. And if you're new to this series, or if you have not heard every session, you may want to look back at the other recordings. We cover a lot of topics so far, including the sunshine vitamin, vitamin D, including various aspects of getting started on exercise and the value of just moving your legs and why that's important and how to do so in an easy way. We try to keep the bar very low here. That's why it's called Easy Health and Fitness. So today I would like to talk about a very universal topic that I am absolutely certain will speak to everybody watching. And if it doesn't, your money back, guaranteed. The question is, I'll throw it out like this as we do in the book. This is all based on the book, Body and Soul. It's you're getting the whole book here. If you watch this series long enough, you won't have to buy the book. But you may want the book as a reference tool or to review. So we have a chapter in the book called True Happiness. And the question is, does food make you happy? And I think if I asked this to everybody watching, if I did a survey, I think most people would say yes. At times food does make me happy. Seeing beautiful, delicious, tasty food when you're hungry, there's a certain pleasure there. It's a true pleasure. It's a real pleasure. The fact is, the brain's chemical response to these nutrients, fat, sugar, and other tastes that we get, is very similar to the way the brain responds to cocaine and alcohol and other drugs. It's a very real pleasure. And that sort of introduces the challenge we have in this B'Tselem Behema struggle, the struggle between trying to be a B'Tselem Elohim, living in the image of God, and my Behema nature, my animal nature, which is for sure real. How do we find that balance? I'd like to quote the late Rav Avram Tversky, Dr. Avram Tversky, the great psychiatrist. What's confusing us is we're confusing, according to Rabbi Tversky, pleasure versus happiness versus pleasure. Listen to what he says. The guf, that is the body, and the neshama, the soul, the guf and the neshama are antagonistic. The more you provide the guf, the more you detract from the neshama. And you cannot be happy when you detract from the neshama. You hear this? There is a pleasure in eating food, but that's not happiness. There's a struggle between these two desires. We all desire pleasure. That's a behema, a bodily desire. We also desire pleasure. We also desire happiness, and that's a neshama desire. The taiva that we have is so strong that it can convince a person to even eat unhealthy food. It's really remarkable. That's how strong that behema desire for that pleasure is. But after the fact, after a person has eaten that unhealthy food, he typically regrets it. In fact, sometimes before he eats it, he says to himself, I'm going to regret this, but I'm going to do it anyway. What's going on there? That's confusion. It's a confusion between true happiness and short-term pleasure. And that's what we have to learn about and contemplate if we want to conquer this fundamental challenge of life. And this, as we said in previous sessions, if we go back to session 1 of this series, and session 2, we laid out this foundation of this is the main struggle of why you were here on this planet, is to deal with this. So don't think it's just like something to deal with, once and then get over it and move on with your life. This is a daily challenge to give us that exercise of that neshama muscle, working the neshama, improving its self-realization and its control over the behemoth. Now, it is likely that most of us have some level of food addiction. And we put here on page 74 a simple series of questions to ask yourself to determine if possibly you have a food addiction. Here are the questions. I'll read them to you and you can try to answer these. Do you frequently crave sweet foods? Do you sometimes think about food somewhat obsessively? When you eat less junk food, do you feel withdrawal symptoms? Do you regularly eat more than you should? Do you sometimes binge? Do you ever use food as comfort when life is stressful? Do you have a hard time skipping dessert? Do you rationalize, such as, it's not so bad, it's not that much, it's a mitzvah after all? If you answered yes to even one of these questions, it might help you to consider your food you're eating as an addiction, a nearly uncontrollable urge. Just like an alcoholic cannot drink socially anymore once they're in recovery, a food addict means being extremely strict about triggers to that addiction, not having them in the house. Especially if your weight has crept into the obesity range where doctors say you're putting yourself in danger. In a way, food addiction is actually more of a challenge than drug or alcohol addiction, because it is possible to, of course, to get to the point where I don't have any drugs or alcohol around within arm's reach. It's impossible to live without food available. So it's actually a stronger challenge, a bigger challenge in that way than drug or alcohol addiction. So how do we deal with that? How does a normal person conquer such a mountain? It actually almost seems impossible. You know, it's surrounded by food, and calories are so cheap, and most of the food that's available, you can stop at a gas station along the highway and what's being sold there is completely bad for you. That's all that's there. How do we deal with this? How do we encourage ourselves to persevere? I'd like to share with you a very encouraging passage from the Gemara, from the Talmud Sukkah. This is Nun Beis Amud Aleph. This should encourage all of us. Rabbi Yehuda taught, in the future, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, will bring the Yetzer Hara. He's going to bring the evil inclination and slaughter it before the righteous and before the wicked. To the wicked, it will appear as a hair's breadth. Nothing. Tiny little nothing. But to the righteous, it appears as a tall mountain. The wicked are going to look at this Yetzer Hara and say, what a fool I was. I could have conquered this. I didn't try. And the righteous are going to look at this and say, how did I ever do this? If conquering your food taiva sometimes feels like climbing Mount Everest, the Gemara is telling you that's because you're a righteous person. So, to quote Winston Churchill, never, ever, never, never, never give up. Don't give up. It's a mountain to climb, but that's because you're a righteous person. So one step at a time, one day at a time, set yourself up for success, and with God's help, you will be gesund. Until next time.